Here are the top 3 reasons why stretching will make your hip osteoarthritis worse. Now, before I get into those 3 reasons, I am not completely against stretching. I just want to give you that caveat. In fact, at the end of the video, the second half of the video, I'm going to give you 3 reasons why you might do some stretching, and I'll get into the details on why I'm kind of on both sides of the fence here. But what I do want to make clear in this video is that there are some very obvious reasons why stretching might be a bad idea, and it's not talked about in the medical field. And so I want to give you these 3 reasons. Number 1 is that stretching, especially aggressive stretching, can add compression to the hip joint. Now, if your hip joint is irritated right now because you have an irritated osteoarthritic hip, and it hurts to put weight on it, like when you walk for a certain amount of time, or if it's hurting you worse as the day goes on, like by the end of the night, or if you have a lot of stiffness in the morning, if you go aggressively stretch, what happens is in the ball and socket joint, as you take it to the end range, all the muscles and the tendons that connect those muscles to the bones, all of those muscles and tendons around the joint tension up. You add tension, you wind them up, and it causes more compression in the joint. And in osteoarthritis, the actual word osteoarthritis means bone joint swelling or bone joint inflammation. And if you had inflammation on your skin, like if you had a cut on your skin, wouldn't it make sense that you don't want to put more pressure on it? Well, that's kind of what you're doing when you go aggressively stretch. You're compressing that hip joint and holding pressure on it for however long you're stretching. That's why it can actually hurt. Now, you can get the sensation that it feels good because you are lengthening the muscle, possibly the tendon too. I'll get to that. But you're also adding compression to the joints, so you're kind of doing something good and something bad at the same time. So I am against aggressive stretching for that reason. Now, the second reason, like I was alluding to, is if you aggressively stretch, there comes a point where the muscle stops stretching. There's actually a reflex in the muscle where it detects it's gone to its limit of what it's going to give as far as a stretch. And if you continue pushing into that stretch, on the ends of the muscles, you have tendons that connect that muscle to the bones. And you'll begin to stretch those tendons. Now, tendons are not meant to stretch. They're not what we call contractile tissue, like that it has the ability to shorten and lengthen. Tendons are static. They just stay the same length that they always are. But if you aggressively stretch and the contractile tissue, the muscle, gives what it's going to give, and then you continue to push it, then you're going to add more length to those tendons. This is bad because it reduces the efficiency of the actual muscle because now you've added more length to the entire unit. So it's a little more complicated than just go stretch and it's going to feel better, because I feel like that's what I get from a lot of patients when I talk to them. The third reason to not stretch if you have hip arthritis is that it doesn't solve the root of the problem. Hip arthritis is caused by a muscle imbalance. And stretching can provide you with some short-term relief, which is obviously a good thing. You might not need to take pain medications during that time or do something else that is maybe going to have some negative side effects. But the effects of stretching are short-lived, and they're not going to give you the long-term relief that you're probably looking for. You probably don't want to be living with hip arthritis, and so you need to focus on something that's going to give you that long-term relief. So when can stretching be beneficial for you? Well, let me give you 3 points. The first one is if you actually have a limitation in your range of motion. In other words, if your hip just doesn't come up all the way or back or to the sides or all the directions that it can go and it rotates as well, if your arthritic hip is limited in motion compared to your other hip, maybe you have arthritis in both hips and you know that you've lost some motion, then stretching, if you do stretching and it does actually improve your motion, because in some cases it won't, if it does improve your motion, then it might be a good idea to do some stretching. But that stretching is only going to last a short time. The effects from the stretching, the increases in range of motion is only going to be short-lived unless you pair it with some sort of exercise that solves the root problem so that you can maintain that newfound range of motion after you've stretched. So the fallacy here, the problem is that people will go stretching and they get short-term relief, and so they think that if they keep stretching and they continue stretching on a consistent basis, like every day, multiple times a day, or if they stretch harder, that the improvements will improve over time, like that the improvements will compound, or that they'll stack on top of each other as time goes on. But that's not what happens. What actually happens, and you might have gone through this already, is people reach a point where stretching doesn't really do much for them anymore. It doesn't really improve the range of motion anymore, and it doesn't really take away the pain like it used to when they first started to stretch, because they've maxed out the benefits of it, and then they haven't paired it with the exercising, so there hasn't been a consistent improvement that's been held and continued over time. They've just lost the improvements within the day or even within hours after stretching. But if you do have a limitation in motion, stretching does need to be a part of your plan, but it needs to be paired with certain exercise. Now, there's two more reasons why you should do stretching. And the first one, just because it feels good. Now, like I said, aggressive stretching, not a good idea, but mild to even just moderate stretching. And the way that I would give you guidance on how to know where you're stretching, like as far as mild, moderate, or aggressive, is put it on a scale of 0 to 10. And if you're at like 6 or beyond, I would consider that aggressive. Even 5 is kind of pushing it. I tell patients that I do coach on stretching because they have a range of motion limitation to keep it under a 3. 1 or 2 is the sweet spot. 3, 4, 5 begins to become moderate, and some people just react with that reflex. It's called the stretch reflex, where the muscle doesn't want to give anymore. Then you start to stretch the tendons. And so if you do benefit from stretching, if you do have a range of motion problem and it feels good to stretch, then stretching's okay to be doing it, but don't look at it to solve your root problem. You need to be doing some sort of specific exercise that does address the root muscle imbalance. Now, the third reason why you should stretch is because your mind feels good for doing it. Some people just clear their mind by stretching. Some people get a lot of benefit mentally and emotionally by stretching. This is commonly seen in yoga routines. So if you're stretching for that reason, if that's what you're optimizing for, you want to just have mental health, you want to feel good in your body, then go for it. Just have the right mindset about it. It's not going to solve the root problem alone. Joining a yoga class and consistently going to yoga can improve your flexibility temporarily, but it's not going to improve your strength the way your body needs it to get over this hip arthritis problem. If you're looking for a comprehensive plan to get this problem solved at the root of it, the root of hip arthritis, it's a muscle imbalance, I've got a program for you called the Hip Arthritis Recovery Program. You can learn all about it down in the description below. I've got a link to it. I've also got a bunch of free videos here on YouTube in a playlist called the Hip Arthritis Help Playlist. You'll find it linked in the description below too. Hey, if this video was good for you, if you thought it was beneficial, please give us a thumbs up. Please share this with somebody you think needs to see this, especially somebody who's been stretching aggressively. They don't need to be doing that. It's going to hurt them. And please consider subscribing to our channel if you haven't already, so that you don't miss out on any of the helpful videos that we post each and every week. And please drop a comment. Let us know how you're doing. Let us know if this has helped you out. Give us your story. We'd love to hear back from you, and we'd love to get back to our comments. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.